Hi everyone, in this video we're going to go over how to clean your brushes, what you'll need for that, then also just general safety when it comes to painting with oils. So there will be a few things that I want you to keep in mind, especially with some particular pigments or paints that we have in our set. So let's start off though with cleaning our brushes. So first you'll need some paper towels. I have some blue shop towels, but if you just have regular paper towels, that's totally fine. You're gonna want some vegetable oil. Now don't use your olive oil, that's too nice. Just get a random, or not random, but just get a standard vegetable oil. So I have canola oil. Now we're never gonna be adding this to our paint. So you don't want to use this as a painting medium. It's just for cleaning your brushes. This isn't nice enough to use to add to your paint, but it's fine to clean your brushes with. And you'll just want to make sure that you work out any of this oil from your brush before you return back to painting. Okay? And then also a jar to put your oil into. Now I have a couple of other things that you can think about. They're not required, but especially if you're in the class and you're really liking oil painting, you might want to consider getting these. So I have this little linseed oil soap from Trekell Art Supplies. I really like this soap, so you can use that. Dish soap is also totally fine. So once we complete this process with the oil, you'll just take your brush to your sink, clean it with some dish soap, and then you'll be done. Eventually you could get some linseed soap if you wanted to. There's also this brush restorer. This is also from Trekell, and I really like this as well. So if we're getting farther along in the semester, your brushes are getting a little raggedy, the brush restorer is kind of like a conditioner for your brushes. It's quite nice. So after you've finished cleaning your brushes and they are dry, you can dip it into the restorer and shape your brush, let that dry completely, and the brush will feel really good. So there's that. Anyway, let's talk about cleaning your brushes. You're gonna start with the vegetable oil first, okay? So you put that into your jar, take your painty brush, so it's all loaded with paint. So what I'm gonna start to do is dip that into the oil and then work out the pigment onto my paper towel. So you can see really clearly that I have paint coming out, right? What we're aiming for in the oil is that eventually, as we're cleaning this, that there is no pigment showing on our paper towel anymore, it's just oil. So you want to get all of that paint and that pigment out of your brush in the oil stage, okay? All right, so I'm gonna do that now and just keep working that out. You're gonna do that for all of the brushes that you want to clean. Okay, now, if I want to say, if I'm just taking a break from painting, then I might just clean my brush just with the oil, but then I'll leave my brush if I'm going to be painting in, say, another hour, another couple of hours. Then you do not wash your oil painting brush completely. Now, here's why. If you go and then take this brush and you wash it with water, that water stays in the brush for a little while. It takes a while to dry, right? So let it dry, say, overnight. But if I take a brush that is soaked in water and then I use oil paint with it, oil and water don't go together, right? They push away from each other. So if you think about if you're having bread with balsamic vinegar, which is going to be water-based, and then olive oil, when you put those two things together, they're separating out, right? The same kind of thing is happening in your brush. So if you have water, you've just cleaned your brush, you're adding oil, that oil pushes the water way down and it logs it in the brush, and it can actually cause your brush to start to kind of rot over time. So it's really not good for your brushes when you do that. So if you're just taking a break from painting, you can clean out your brushes with the oil, work that oil out of your brush completely with your paper towel. But don't wash it completely. If, however, you're not going to be painting for, say, another day, go ahead and wash your brush completely, and you'll do that with both the oil and then eventually also the dish soap in the water. Then let that dry at least for a night before you use it again, okay? And if you go to it the next morning and your brush still feels wet, don't use that brush. Let it dry completely before you come back to it. Okay. So, all right, so now I am looking at my paper towel, and I am not getting any pigment left. It's just a oil spot on my paper towel. So that means that I have worked out all of that pigment, that paint that was in the brush. So now this brush would be ready to take it over to the sink, add a little bit of dish soap, and just wash it. Make sure all the dish soap gets out of there, but that's how you're gonna finish washing your brush, okay? And then make sure that you don't end up storing your brushes just like this for a long time, because it will mess with the shape of the brush. So for example, if you have a round brush which comes to a point and you're storing it in a jar and letting gravity take its course, it's gonna make that brush kind of curl and lose its shape. So then just store your brushes flat. All right, so that is cleaning your brushes. So next up, we're gonna talk about some pigment safety. There's a few paints that I want you to have an awareness about and to think about. And actually, before we get into that, let me mention a couple more things too. So my apartment is set up for me as a painter, right? I have this little table, which is my painting table. Now, I don't cover this table because it's my painting table, and if I get paint on that, it's okay. But you might be working at your kitchen table or your table which you use for other things at home. So you may want to consider covering your table. You could use paper, you could put paper down, so newspapers are gonna be great. There's like flyers that come in the mail. You can get that. You could tape it down with your blue tape if you want it to stay in place. You could cut apart paper bags, do that. Plastic wrap is great too. So you may want to consider covering your surface so it doesn't get covered in oil paint. That's one thing to think about. Other things to consider. So you have your palette box. Let's talk about that a little bit. So your palette box is a great tool. It's a way to contain your paint, obviously. And then it's also a way to save your paint. So let's say you've been painting all day, you need to take a break, you're gonna be done for the night. You don't wanna just leave your oil paint out on your table, first because you don't wanna accidentally touch it, you don't want your pets to accidentally get into it, and also if you're just leaving your paint out, it's going to start to dry out. So the palette box is great because it can allow you to save your paint. So you have these lids. Mine is very painty because I've had this palette box for a long time. And you're just gonna secure that down all the way so it's kind of airtight. Okay, so you secure that. So I save my paint all the time. You know, you're rarely just gonna finish things in a single session, so this palette box allows you to save that. All right, so now let's talk about your actual paints and some things that you need to keep in mind as you're painting. All right guys, and last thing, what do you do if you get paint on your skin? So you can actually take a little bit of your vegetable oil, add a little bit of that to your paper towels, start by getting that off with some of the vegetable oil, And then just go and wash your hands with dish soap until that paint is completely off. So you'll really want to do that right away if you get, say, a cadmium on your skin. Cadmium is just, it's a toxic chemical. Now they've produced the paint in a way where it's still relatively safe. Still, however, you don't want it hanging out on your skin. You don't want to absorb it into your system. You want to get that heavy metal off of you as quickly as you can. So just wash your hands frequently, which I guess is something for us all to think about anyway, in these somewhat crazy times. So that's some general studio safety. I'm gonna upload more resources to our class page as well. And as always, if you have any questions, just feel free to